Hello everyone, this is Hank. Today I'm back for another episode of Adobe Camera Raw. Today we are going to talk about the curve panel. Okay, as you know, we already had videos that talking about the histogram, the light color effects, and today we're going to talk about the curve. Now, as I mentioned before in the previous video, the edit panel, which is the composite of all of that, I briefly mentioned that the curve can perform many functions that would rival the light color effects. Okay, the color grading in a small way, a color mixer function as well. So it does a lot of things. But normally, by itself, it may not be able to do as well as a job as other panel in here. So basically, curve is usually used in ACR to complement other devices instead of like replacing. In theory, you can replace it if you want to, but that would be a pretty harder job to do. Okay, so each of the edit panel has its place in the ACR universe. And curve is just one of them. You usually use them to supplement rather than replacing, but it can do quite a bit of things. Okay, so just very quickly to give you a general concept. Okay, in the light panel you have exposure. If you go here, exposure is shown at as the middle part of it. And then you have the shadow part, and you have the blacks part, you have the highlights part, and you have the whites part. Okay, so these are the one. Now, curves in many ways are the same with that, except that for whatever reason ACR decided to use slightly different terms. So you kind of have to correlate them. They basically the same thing, but they are called differently in curves. Okay, right now what you have here is the parametric curve. You actually have 5 different representation of curves that you can choose. Okay, the first one is the parametric curve, and as you can see that there's a shadowy curves behind this graphs. Okay, and if you look carefully, it kind of resembles the histogram. Actually, it is the histogram, but it's just a little bit taller, okay, and skinnier than the histogram up here. But it's the same thing. So when you put your cursor over a certain area, and it tells you the shadows. It tells you this area here is a shadow. And you go over here, it's called darks. Instead of whites and blacks and shadows and highlights, it calls it differently. It calls this thing dark, and it calls this lights, and it calls this highlights instead of whites and blacks and shadow and highlights. But it basically represents the same thing. Okay, so keep that in mind, because with the curves we can change all of that. So we can change the lights and the darks and the highlights and the shadows, as well as whites and blacks. Okay, so it does everything the light panel does. And on the red, the green, the blue channel here, it allows you a certain control in the color region of it, including the color mixing to a point, the color grading to a point. Okay, so curves can do all of that, but as I mentioned, it should be used as complementary on top of what you already have, and not to replace it. But if you really wanted to, out of principle or whatever reason, you can still do it. You can use the curve to do mostly everything that you need to do to make the photo look better. Okay, so let's explore that. This is going to be a long video. I'm trying to keep it as short as possible for you. Parametric curve, okay, the idea is that you have this white curve here. This white curve represented the equilibrium, or rather the way your photo look right now without any changes in the curves. It looked like this, okay? So now if you change the straight line in any way, okay, then the photo is going to be affected in the light areas that you affect. For example, if you change it here, then your highlights area is going to be affected more than the rest of it. Okay, if you change it here, the shadow is going to be affected more than anything else in the picture. So you can, in a way, selectively brighten or darken, just like the lights panel, right? Okay, and in the parametric curve, okay, this is the first choice versus the point curve. These are two of the same, except that they are slightly different for you to choose. Okay, before the original ACR, it only have the point curve, but recently they added a parametric curve to make the operation, simplify the operation a little bit. So for the people that don't use curve a whole lot, this thing is a little bit easier to deal with in terms of adjustment and also in terms of protection. So let me kind of show you quickly what you can do with it. For example, if you see the sky here, actually, personally, we already fixed the sky that look okay. But if you want to make it look darker, right, you can go up to this area here, you pull it down. As you can see that this area is impacted. And this thing here, okay, is darkened because of that. But the rest of it look almost unchanged because the curve down here is not affected. Okay, so all of the darker area is not affected, but the lighter area is now darker. All right, so that is how you do it on the reverse. If you want the darker area to be lightened, then you just pull this area up like this, and then it'll be lightened. Okay, so depending on how you affect this curve, it's going to change. Okay, now if pulling the curve is just too complicated for some, then those that find it too troublesome to change it here, then you can just change it down here, same thing. Okay, so you can affect the way the photo look by changing these things. Okay. And in a way, they are kind of just like the light panel, kind of selectively choosing different areas, right? You can make the dark area darker, and then to increase the contrast. You can make the lights, lighter, then increase the contrast. You can do that. Okay, now, if you make a mistake, what are you going to do? So easy, right? You can reset it. There's several ways of reset it. Just like everything in ACR, all you have to do is double click on the arrow. It'll reset that particular one, right? Okay, or you can just go into the graph area here, and you can like reset the curve, okay, and reset the split. You don't, okay, I haven't explained the split yet. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, for example, in the previous example, right, if I want to make the highlights darker, so I go like that, as you can see that it affects largely almost half of the curves right here. Now if I want to limit it just to the first quadrant, all I have to do is move this thing over here, so that now, okay, instead of affecting the entire squadron, I only affected the first squadron there. Like that. That's the first quadrant. Only affect that by moving these things. Okay. So you can make it affect more or less by moving this, right? You move that, affect more, you see. Move over here. Now it affects a whole lot more. affects the entire half of the curve now by changing just the highlights. You get the idea. So you can do the same for the lights, the dark, the shadow by moving these things. Again, you can just double click on one to reset it. Okay, reset it. If you want to reset the whole thing, you can go over here. You can reset the curves. Region is the curve, the white curve. Push that, and then I reset that. Now these things here, the split, you can just reset the split, and then it go back to 0. So that's how you reset. And of course, the infamous alternate key, reset the whole curves. All right, so that is parametric in a nutshell. One last thing, okay? So now, if you have an area that you really wanted to change, okay, for example, if you think the tint here is a little bit too bright, you can use a targeted adjustment tool here, okay? So you can just click on the highlights there, and you hold down the left key, and then you can make it darker by moving to the left, make it brighter moving to the right. Okay, so you can just target that area, of course. Now, when you do this thing in the edit panel, everything you do is globally. So it will target that particular highlights area, and it does that for the whole picture. Wherever you have that same kind of highlights, it will increase them as well. Okay, later in the lessons, when we talk about masking, okay, then you will find that all of these control, the lights, the color, including the curve, exists in the masking. And when you change the curve example in the masking, only the masked area is affected, and that is the effective way to do the selective changing. Right now, everything you do affect everything in the whole picture. Keep that in mind. Okay, again, I'm going to just reset everything back to 0. So that is parametric curve. Okay, so let's move to this one. This one is basically the same thing, except the representation is different, and this is the traditional curve representation. And if you, once you move over to Photoshop and you use curve, you see the similarity. It's basically the same thing. So here, as I mentioned, curves can either replace or complement all of the other edit panels almost, okay, by manipulating things. For example, let's quickly go back to the light. Okay, you have the exposure, change the whole thing bright or dark, right? You can change the contrast. You can change the highlights, the shadow, the whites, and the blacks. Now, in curves, you can do all of that, okay? Keep in mind that it's independent of what you already changed. So this is in addition, okay? Or in subtraction, depending on which way you're going. But so you can use this thing as a complement instead of, a replacement. Okay, so now let me kind of shut down the color so you can see the you can see the correlation between the exposure, contrast, highlight. Okay, so now, for example, if I want to change the exposure, right? If I want to brighten the whole picture, all you have to do is grab the middle here and pull it up, and I would have brightened the entire photo, just like the exposure. Okay. On the reverse, I just pull it down, then I would make the whole thing darker. Okay, double click on it to reset. Okay, so that's exposure. What about contrast? Contrast is the action, like you make the whites whiter and the blacks blacker to increase the contrast. So instead of pulling this thing, all you have to do is to click here to make the bright brighter, and click here to make the dark darker. And then you would have increase the contrast just like that. Okay, so you can duplicate that as well. Right? And now if you want to increase the highlights alone, then you can just make another point here to lock lock this part here, right? And then you can just do increase a highlight like this, okay, or decrease a highlight like this without affecting the rest of it. Alright, so you get the idea. Okay, double click to reset. Alright, so so shadow is the same way. You can move up or down. Now what about the whites and blacks? Okay, okay, let's reset this curve. You can always go here and just do reset the channel. Okay, so you reset this thing. Now the whites and the black, okay, you, for example, in this histogram here, just like here, okay, so you don't have a whole lot of whites here. So if you want to increase the white, okay, you just do this. Okay, so you can increase the white by moving this thing up here like that to tighten the curve. Okay, if you want to decrease the white, you do the opposite. Alright, or this is the standard, right? So that's how you change the white. Similarly, increase the black, right? Or decrease the black this way. Right, now take it to the extreme. Right, you can go the black all the way up here and the whites all the way down here. Now you have effectively changed this thing into a negative, just like that. So with the curve you can control quite a bit. Alright, you can just reset by doing this. It's quickest way to reset, right? Okay, so now like everything else, okay, if I pull this thing like that to brighten now, look at the input and the output. Okay, input meaning that at a certain point, right? If I put in 100% or 104, whatever the unit is, it's not important, but normally this means that it is from the scale of 0 to 255. This is 104. That's exactly what it means. That's the brightness of that particular point. Okay, so now output, I have increased it. Instead of 104, I increased it to 145. Okay, so at this very point here, okay, if I move the point, the value is going to move, right? So that's the value where I'm pointing. Okay, so that is why everything's brighter by this much. That's just what it means. And saturation, if in your doing that, you know, the color get too saturated, and then you can reduce the saturation here. But normally, you know, you don't mess with it unless you have to. Alright, so you see the point curve here. Whenever I put in any changes by myself, it'll change to custom. So this is one way to reset, is if you change to linear, then everything's back to normal, to before you make a change. Now there's a couple of preset. The medium contrast is strong contrast. Okay, when you do this, it automatically do the contrast for you. Okay, the reason that they make a preset for you is because most people use the curve in ACR just to increase the contrast. So they kind of make it easy for you. But, you know, it's really easy to do, right? I mean, you don't really need to be very fancy about that. So all you have to do is on the white here, just click it. On the black here, you click it. And then you increase the contrast just like that. Very simple. It's not really hard. Okay, so we can change target. Again, you can target a certain area to make it, say, brighter by just clicking on it and then push it. Okay, then that area and anything similar to that intensity is going to get a pop like this. Okay, so you can target a certain area. Okay. Now, so we talk about the main gist of the two important curves, which is the parametric curve and the point curve. Now, what about the red, green, and blue channels? Okay, those are. If you have to guess, what do you think that it is? Okay, what it means here is like you can affect just the color part of it. The red channel, you can change two colors, the red, obviously, and the inverse color, which is the cyan. Okay, so if you pull it toward the cyan, then everything's go cyan. Okay, you go up here, everything's go red. Okay, so that's basically how you can affect the light, right? And in some way you can do a color grading out of here, because in the color grading light down here, what you normally do is like you make let's say you make the dark area cold and the bright area warm, right? You can easily do that by just grabbing this thing and pull it down to the cyan, so it is colder in the dark. And then you just grab this thing and you move it up so the warm area is warm. And then now you have done the color grading very easily with the curves. Alright, and similarly, can you do the green channel? In the green, up you increase the green, down you increase the magenta. Okay, reset. A couple ways to reset. Double click on this point, or just right click and just reset the channel itself. Okay, and then the blue is affecting the blue and the yellow, right? Go up here, everything turn blue. Go up here, everything turn yellow. Again, if you want to split the thing colder for the darks and warmer for the bright, like that. Okay, so you can easily do a color grading by curves. Okay, with that, we are basically done with this. So hopefully this will help you having another arsenal in the tools to make your photos look better through the use of curves. Right? Again, just a recap. To reset everything, you hold down the alternate option and then you can press reset. That means reset everything. Or you can go in here. You reset one channel, the channel that you're on, or you can reset all of them, right? You can even copy and paste the channel one to the other. For example, if you do the red and you like it and you want to apply it to the blue, and you can just copy and paste it. Okay. And okay, with that, I'm going to reset it to everything over here. Okay, and then you're back. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for staying with me to the end. I would really appreciate a like from you. And if you haven't subscribed, I would love to have a subscription from you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.